let's talk about that beautiful, bizarre, and profoundly unsubtle period in film history, the 1980s direct-to-video sci-fi horror boom. You might remember the vibe. A cultural moment where Hollywood blockbusters like The Terminator, Alien, and eventually Predator landed with the subtle grace of an atom bomb.
You son of a bitch.
And every single low-budget fly-by-night production company decided, yeah, we could totally do that too. Just cheaper, and with more visible scenes. This isn't about high art, Oscar bait sci-fi. This is about the stuff you'd find crammed onto a dusty shelf at a Blockbuster, right next to the expired candy and a copy of Ernest Scared Stupid. These films didn't try to be good cinema. They tried to be aggressively profitable pastiche. And nowhere is this philosophy more gloriously, or let's be honest, groan-inducingly, on display than in Fred Olen Ray's 1990 masterpiece, Alienator. This video contains spoilers, so consider watching the film first before you continue. And if you like what you see, click the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to click the little bell to be notified for new videos. Okay, so the plot. Strap in because this plot has to move faster than the budget disappears. We start in space, naturally, at the most understaffed maximum security prison in the galaxy. An intergalactic rebel named Cole, who looks suspiciously like a guy who is very passionate about owning a Harley, makes a quick, cheap break for freedom. He crash lands on Earth, specifically in a totally generic forested state park. Prison warden Jan Michael Vincent, who is apparently way too dramatic for his job, immediately dispatches the ultimate tracking unit, the Alienator.
Call out the Hunter unit.
A towering, emotionless gynoid in what appears to be highly polished plastic armor. Her primary directive is simple: retrieve or terminate. Well, he couldn't rightly send PJ Souls, could he? The station needs her boob windows. Cole meets up with a group of unmistakably disposable teenagers. A few park rangers, a few vacationing college students, the jock, the nerd, the prom queen, the burnout, the basket case, you know the drill. They're instant cannon fodder, and the movie doesn't even try to pretend otherwise. The rest of the film is essentially a glorified low-speed slasher movie. The Alienator stalks them and kills them one by one using a combination of laser guns and very visible rubber prosthetics, while the teens try to escape by running through the same patch of woods over and over. It's a relentless, geographically baffling chase movie. Eventually, the survivors realize this whole situation is insane, and they decide to fight back. They pull out whatever random, ineffective weapons they can find, because nothing says high-tech, unstoppable space killer like getting shut down by a net. In the end, after all the pointless running and screaming, our heroes manage to, spoiler alert, not that it matters, finally disable the Alienator through some convoluted last-minute plot device. The crisis is averted, the end. Except not the end, because it turns out this whole time Cole actually was the bad guy, and he sucks the soul right out of this guy. Somehow the Alienator has returned, though, and she goes analog with the axe swing, killing Cole and establishing that the film's monster was a cop the whole time. Some sort of robotic cop. A robo-police officer, if you will.
Bitches leave.
Our remaining heroes watch the space cop take off in what looks like what happens when you try to take a picture of a breathtaking full moon with your smartphone camera. Okay, now the end. Now before you rush down to the comments to tell me that this film is a dumpster fire, yes, I know. It's got all the narrative coherence of a toddler's fever dream. The acting is...
It's just coincidence that the power's out, that the phone won't work, that the cars won't start. Who are you kidding?
Present. The budget seems to have peaked at roughly $5 in a pack of ramen noodles. The whole thing barely holds together. But here's the thing. In its chaotic, low-budget glory, Alienator actually becomes a fascinating case study. It's the ultimate distilled example of what happens when the intellectual thread of high-concept science fiction crashes headfirst into the visceral, localized panic of the slasher movie. The film literally starts with a high-stakes prison break in space, only to immediately, and I mean immediately, shift that entire cosmic menace down to a secluded state park on Earth. Why? Because saving the galaxy is expensive, kids. By having an unstoppable, hyper-muscled murder bot terrorize a bunch of horny, unsuspecting park rangers and college students, that's cheap. That's B-movie gold. That is robo-sploitation. Alienator isn't a failure of sci-fi, it's a triumph of pure, unadulterated, glorious B-movie horror.
Listen, that's gibberish.
It manages to translate those terrifying, vast technological anxieties into the most basic, profitable, and fundamentally gross thing the audience actually wants. An impure monster that won't stop. Let's dive down the digital rabbit hole and figure out how this thing manages to be so audaciously brilliant.
Are we human or are we dancing?
Yes, Alienator is cheap, derivative, and incredibly goofy.
It's your career you're throwing away.
Can't order me to love you, Commander.
But to understand why this low-budget trash heap works as a horror film, we have to talk theory for a second. Deep breaths, people. We're going academic for exactly 1 minute. Professor Noel Carroll has this hugely influential idea about the horror genre. He argues that the signature feeling of horror, that delicious combination of fear and disgust, is generated by the monster's impurity. It's not only a physical threat, it's an entity that transgresses established cultural categories. It violates the fundamental binaries: human, animal, living, dead, clean, unclean. Which brings us, naturally, to a colossal, emotionless cyborg woman stalking teenagers in the forest. The Alienator, and I'm using the academic term here, is a gynoid, that is, a female form robot. She is the literal hyper-muscled nexus point where high-tech science fiction meets pure, low-down horror. She is a perfect example of what Carroll is talking about, a being in a state of categorical contradiction. She has a human form, it's female, it's armored, and it's embodied by the frankly incredible physique of Tegan Clive, but she's corrupted and enhanced by technology. She is the ultimate blend of the organic and the artificial, the alive and the mechanical. This isn't a subtle psychological threat, it's a physical entity that causes affective turmoil. Sidebar: I'm not saying that the film needs to be remade with Rhea Ripley, I'm just saying that I would buy that shit in IMAX. Link me to the Kickstarter. The terror of the gynoid isn't just that she'll kill you, the terror is that she looks like a person but isn't a person. It's the uncanny valley aesthetic, where the resemblance is just close enough to be disturbing. And in a cheap B-movie, this effect is actually amplified. Her suit looks conspicuously synthetic. Her movements are deliberately stiff and robotically slow. She's not fast, she's relentless. She's the Frankenstein's monster for the Reagan era, a technologically born, unthinking engine of destruction that operates under a singular directive. She embodies the techno-fetish of the 1980s, the fear of the perfect, non-human killing machine, cloaked in a disturbingly familiar form. Her origin is the space opera of a totalitarian regime, but her function in the film is pure dumb horror. So the first key takeaway is this: the technological impurity of the monster is the theoretical foundation upon which the film builds its horror identity. A cheap production? Maybe. But the Alienator herself is a theoretically perfect slasher killer, provided by science fiction. Which brings us to the next and arguably most important question. How do you take an expensive, high-concept cosmic threat and turn it into something you can film on a shoestring budget in the public park? The answer is aesthetic translation. So the Alienator is a theoretically perfect monster, but a great monster doesn't make a great movie, especially when your budget wouldn't cover James Cameron's catering bill for a single day. Which brings us to the real genius, or to be generous, the audacity of a film like this. The actual, cynical economic reality behind the camera. The film's entire strategy is a textbook example of robosploitation, a specific form of genre synthesis that hinges on what academic folks call pastiche. And pastiche, for those of you who haven't spent too much time in the media studies corner of the internet, is essentially the deliberate, unironic, but nakedly uncreative copying of stylistic motifs of earlier works. Alienator isn't subtle. It's a Frankenstein monster stitched together from the most profitable parts of other movies. You start with the opening, a space prison break. This is the pastiche. This is the 2 minutes of footage designed to go straight onto the VHS cover to trick the unwitting renter into thinking they're getting a Terminator meets Alien epic. This is the paratextual marketing, the cover art, the title, the blurb, promising an expensive high-stakes science fiction conflict. But then, as if someone yelled cut after the first shot and the accountant screamed, "We're over budget!" the narrative does a full screeching U-turn. The cosmic rebel Cole crashes his ship, and the hyper-advanced hunter unit is dispatched. Where does she land? A secluded, fog-drenched state park. This isn't a storytelling decision, it's an economic imperative. The production team realized, we need an unstoppable killer chasing people. But space sets are expensive. Forests? Forests are cheap. Forests are free. And forests have the lighting we need to hide how bad our rubber monster looks. The film translates the intellectual threat of sci-fi into the cheapest possible generic form, the slasher chase. They trade a complex multi-million-dollar world-building exercise for a pre-existing horror structure, the teens in the woods trope, that can be executed on a shoestring budget using minimal sets and maximum narrative shorthand. The ineptitude of the shift, the absolute jarring collapse of scale, is actually the point of the whole exercise. Alienator's refusal to pretend it's anything more than a cash grab, its audacity in swapping out a space battle for a low-stakes hunt in the park, is what makes it so fascinating as an artifact. It reveals that the heavy reliance on pastiche is not a flaw, it's the core feature of the exploitation market, strategically delivering the most profitable genre iconography, the sci-fi monster, within the least expensive genre structure, the slasher. And it leads us to the final necessary question. Once you've translated the theoretical monster into the cheap economy, how do you sustain the horror? You lean on the sheer unstoppable visceral spectacle of the monster, which is where the film's climax and its final strange thesis really kick in. We've established the theoretical monster in the robo-exploitation economy. The Alienator is a monster of categorical impurity, brought down to earth by the need for a cheap slasher backdrop. The question now becomes, what is the point of it all? What is this film's final thesis? If high-budget sci-fi, the Terminator and Alien films, use their spectacle to generate intellectual dread about technology, the military-industrial complex, or corporate villainy, Alienator uses its spectacle for something far more basic: visceral gross-out horror. This is where the film's ineptitude becomes pure, unadulterated passion. The horror in Alienator isn't delivered via slow burn tension or moral ambiguity, it's delivered via affective intensity. It hits you with a series of quick, brutal, and aforementioned geographically nonsensical encounters. The script doesn't waste time on character development. It just keeps the unstoppable, emotionless apparatus of destruction moving. The movie's entire climax is essentially a 20-minute game of cat and mouse that is only necessary because the script, being a product of its B-movie economy, needs to fulfill its genre contract. The Alienator is the physical, relentless embodiment of that contract. It is the guarantee that the audience will get their required minimum dose of monstrous destruction before the credits roll. And this is the final strange takeaway. The film's enduring value is its clarity as an artifact. Alienator doesn't try to elevate the horror or sci-fi genres. It doesn't care about authorial intent beyond delivering what the VHS market demanded. Instead, it uses the intersection of these genres, the sci-fi packaging, slasher execution, to create a completely consumable, visceral spectacle that is perfect in its imperfection. It proves that the power of the monstrous figure, regardless of budget, regardless of how visible the zipper on the side of the monster suit is, can drive a film's entire aesthetic and affective agenda. It is the ultimate distillation of exploitation cinema, taking expensive ideas, rendering them cheap, and in the process, making something profoundly and unapologetically weird. It's a garbage fire, sure, but it's our garbage fire. And I for one wouldn't trade that cheap rubber suit and those janky laser effects for all the expensive CGI in the galaxy. But that's just my reading. What do you guys think? What's your favorite piece of robo-exploitation that makes absolutely no sense? Let me know in the comments below. Stay warm, stay safe, wash your hands, return your shopping carts, make good choices, and I'll see you next time.